Okay, students, in the last segment we looked at what will happen once Columbus initiates the era that's going to be known as the Age of Exploration through contact and conquest, is that Europeans in their search for markets, wealth, and labor forces are going to introduce a new kind of slavery. And that slavery will be racial, perpetual, and hereditary. This kind of slavery had never existed in world history. So let's appreciate something about pre-revolutionary immigration to the United States between 1630 and 1776. You see, once Columbus initiated the encounter between what is referred to as the Old World and the New World, European powers began to fight amongst themselves for control of the Western Hemisphere. First, Spain and Portugal divided the Western Hemisphere amongst themselves, and then France and England joined in and told Spain and Portugal, first in time, first in right, go and send your explorers and put your flags to map out the region. So what's going to happen is Spain, France, and England, in their desire to gain colonial markets, and this is what they're going to do throughout the world. That's not just going to be the Western Hemisphere, but they're also going to go to Africa and Asia. In the process, international accords are going to be written specifically connecting the movements of populations to the expansion of markets. So what's going to happen is Spain, France, and England, and then the countries that are created out of revolution, specifically the United States, they will negotiate agreements for the recruitment of labor forces for the expansion of markets. So again, we come back to that term, formation and control of labor forces. So Spain, France, and England are going to actively recruit populations for the expansion of their colonial markets. They need workers. They need them to move to new areas. So their foreign policies incorporated legal instruments to contract and form labor forces. They searched for labor forces, they created labor contracting agencies, and they went throughout Europe, Africa, and Asia to select these labor forces. And all of these labor forces are going to find their way to the Western Hemisphere. So that when the United States was created, the Founding Fathers inherited the British colonial experience that shaped the way the Constitution approached labor formation, immigration, and settlement policy. Immigration was tied to labor force recruitment and participation. Please get to know this, students. Foreign policy was instrumental in securing workers for the expansion of markets. Foreign policy is what secures workers for businesses. So let's address pre-revolutionary immigration. Prior to the creation of the United States, immigration was so common that the colonial governments of Britain, or the British, the French, and the Spanish, and their colonial governments, they didn't regulate the flow of populations. No one was keeping track of what was going on in terms of bringing people over to the Western Hemisphere. There wasn't no immigration and customs enforcement. Can you imagine leaving it up to the native peoples to create an immigration policy? Can you imagine leaving it up to the native peoples to create a labor policy? Well, let's imagine. Let's see what would have happened if native peoples had created an immigration and customs office.
Honey, it's America!
Finally, we'll be free from the oppressive regime that's ruled our homeland!
Oh, crap! More white people! They just keep flooding across our border! Well, sure, come on in, take our jobs, eat our corn, see what we care! And you know the second they get here, they just start having kids.
Oh, totally! And you know what's worse? They don't use every part of the buffalo!
That's it! Tonight, after the rain dance, we talk to the chief. Hey, ho, 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 ho. Come on, rain! Okay, that should give us scattered showers tomorrow with a 75% chance of sun through the weekend. Gee, every day our borders are being crossed by uninvited foreigners. We have to do something.
Well, if you ask me, and hey, this is just me talking here, I say we shoot them all in the head, make jackets out of their skin, and then leave their carcasses to rot in the sun.
Okay.
Well, I say we welcome them. They're good for the economy, they gave us these comfy blankets, and come on, can anyone here honestly say they don't like fire water?
Didn't they kill your entire family in a raid last week?
Okay, I'll admit there are some cultural differences.
Oh, you pale-face loving hippie!
Excuse me, but paleface seems like a racially charged term. Can we call them something less offensive?
Like what, Hugs with Trees?
Well, their boots make a cracking sound when they walk. Why don't we call them crackers?
Oh, yes. From now on, everybody calls white people crackers.
Alright, so how do we keep these damn crackers from coming here?
We could build a giant fence to keep the crackers from sneaking onto our land.
Oh, come on. You know those crackers would find some way to sneak in. We need enforcement.
I say we lock their cracker asses up!
Enough! Tomorrow I will issue my ruling directly to the crackers. As protector of the lands between Sacred Bear Mountain and Lake Popozao, I declare the following new laws. All uninvited crackers will now be considered illegal crackers, and we can send them back to where they came from at any time.
Send us back to England?
England? We thought you came from the moon. Furthermore, illegal crackers are now required to register with our guest Indian program. And after living in harmony with the land for at least 6 years, they will be given a Junior Scout card that must be presented at all trading posts, wigwams, wampum shacks, casinos. Oh, you gotta be kidding me. Yes, you can what?
Yes, we can live here and work in this new land.
It's our basic human right.
Well, what about our rights?
And how dare you fly a foreign flag in our country?
And how dare you? What are you, like a Wookiee?
I hate crackers!
It's the Eagles. They have come to bring us wisdom. Shh, listen.
Hey, everybody, just chill out, okay, man?
Everybody freaking chill!
Chill. Yes.
These people aren't immigrating, they're like migrating.
Yeah, it's like how we fly south for the winter because it's too freaking cold.
These people just came here because England sucks. I mean, nobody would live in England if they had a choice, right?
It's too freaking cold there. You know, the freaking country sucks. They freaking come here, you know? What's the big freaking deal?
So if we welcome this new wave of immigrants, no harm will come to us?
Probably not, man.
Yeah, what's the worst that could happen?
And so the Indians lived in harmony with the white man forever, and immigration was never a problem in America again.
Okay, students, I chose this particular film clip because it dealt with every stereotype imaginable, every prejudice and stereotype imaginable on both sides, both for whites, for native peoples, as well as the whole discussion on immigration. And it shares with us something, again, about the significance of appreciating what we have inherited since the colonial period. Because for nearly 2 centuries, immigrants were desired and adventurers were recruited through legal and extra-legal means to expand the influence of the Spanish, the French, and the British interests in the Western Hemisphere. And the arrivals of the earliest European and African immigrants are relatively well documented, because the historical record does note that the arrival of the Spanish missionaries occurred in 1565 in Florida, St. Augustine, Florida, in 1565. Then there was a Spanish settlement of the New Mexico colony in 1598. Then in 1607 was the founding of Jamestown. And then finally the arrival of the first slave in Virginia in 1619. So when we take a look at the arrival of the Pilgrims in Massachusetts in 1620, of which we celebrate Thanksgiving. That seems to be celebrated as a national symbol of early immigration, but really the Pilgrims were in reality late in the period of initial European colonization of territory that later became the United States. But by the 1630s, however, immigration to what was to become the United States was so common that individual arrivals and even the total number of immigrants went unrecorded. And this was so for nearly 2 centuries, during which immigration to the colonies and then to the new United States was largely unregulated by these receiving governments. So, what is important to understand is labor formation and work experiences during this first phase of the American experience differs somewhat from the periods that followed, but patterns developed that were to repeat themselves throughout U.S. history. And the most important pattern is colonialism and the attitudes towards race. Hence, what I want you to do in this particular, this assignment, there's going to be a specific assignment that you're going to be dealing with regards to the reading. And what is important to note for this class, especially as it pertains to Latin American immigrant experience, the Mexican immigrant experience, are the underlying attitudes from the colonial period towards race. Colonialism and the attitudes towards race that developed over time become important for us in our discourse over labor organizing and the treatment of immigrant workforces today. Now, despite the fact that the United States is and has always been a nation of immigrants, the immigration process evokes a wide range of responses from various sectors of the U.S. population, and this includes fear, anxiety, sympathy, hate, ethnocentrism, misunderstanding, racial profiling, scapegoating, xenophobia. And all of these anxieties can be traced back to the Spanish, the British, and the French colonial heritage and their respective attitudes towards race. Now, the role of race in Spain and England is very important to appreciate, because beyond their religious practices, the English and the Spanish colonial worlds are going to diverge substantially in their attitudes towards native peoples and Africans, towards slavery and race and labor formation. Now, the Spanish are going to have a tradition of racial mixing. So supposedly, historians say that this made it more acceptable for Spanish settlers to engage in sexual unions with both native peoples and Africans. So when you take a look at the rich racial heritage of Latinos and Mexicans, it reflects this engagement in sexual unions of the Spanish with both native peoples and Africans. So supposedly the Spanish tolerated racial mixing. And meanwhile, the Anglo-Saxon colonies, for the British, interracial mixing was taboo by any class of whites. Race mixing was banned in the British colonies, and race mixing was banned in the United States. Asians, Mexicans, native peoples, blacks, Africans were not allowed to marry a white woman. White males could do whatever they want with other women, but you don't interact with a white female. It's not until the civil rights movements and the Chicano movement of the 50s and 60s that we'll get rid of these laws banning race mixing. Now, in the British colonies, while rape or unsanctioned unions obviously occurred, Anglo-Saxons almost never recognized their mixed-race children, no matter how light-skinned the offspring or how poor the father. So you always get the notion that it's the Spanish that had a more tolerant attitude towards race mixing. But the Spanish were just as sophisticated in their race as were the British. And I'll explain that in the next folder, in the next presentation, in the next folder. Now let me talk about Europe and the Doctrine of Discovery. Let's understand something that's basic to native people's lives once Columbus arrives in 1492. The Doctrine of Discovery. This is the international law that governed European exploration and discovery of new lands around the world for centuries. The Doctrine of Discovery is an international legal principle that grants Europeans and then any country that's going to claim independence from Europe, like for instance the United States, or Mexico, or Guatemala, or whatever country of the Western Hemisphere, by using the Doctrine of Discovery, this international legal principle granted at first Europeans and then Americans property and sovereignty claims over native peoples. Property and sovereignty claims over native lands. As soon as, quote-unquote, Europeans discovered these lands. So discovery becomes important here. It becomes a doctrine. And the doctrine plays an important part of American history, and it plays an important part in modern day Native American law, from Canada all the way to Argentina. The doctrine provides under international law that newly arrived Europeans immediately and automatically acquired property rights in native lands and gained governmental, political, and commercial rights over the inhabitants without the knowledge or consent of native peoples. So when Europeans and then Americans planted their national flags and their religious symbols over newly quote-unquote discovered lands, in other words, they made the discovery, they were demonstrating their legal claim to native territory. And it is in this way that nations of the Western Hemisphere were able to usurp lands for themselves through a legal process. And if native peoples resisted these encroachments, well, war was rationalized by Europeans and then Americans as a means to bring about the legal justification for conquest and colonization. So the Doctrine of Discovery laid the legal foundation for the occupation of the Western Hemisphere. Now, when Columbus did arrive, he's going to set off a chain reaction throughout the Americas. And in the 15th century, Europeans are going to introduce diseases such as smallpox and measles that are going to devastate native communities. So once introduced, they can follow established native trade routes out of the Caribbean and onto the mainland, and native peoples will have to deal with this Holocaust. So this is the end of the presentation on the Columbian Exchange. And I wish for you to read Howard Zinn's introduction, and please pay attention to the assignment because I'm asking you to write on a very controversial topic. Okay, thank you very much.